There's a feeling most people never talk about. You dream about a trip for months, planning it, saving for it, thinking about it on a random Tuesday at work. Then you get there, and it's just fine. That wasn't your fault. It was a lie, and today we're exposing it. Bali might be the most personal one on this list. At some point, most people who love travel have had a Bali dream. The rice terraces stretching endlessly into a green horizon, a temple at sunrise with the mist still sitting low over the water. The feeling of being somewhere ancient and untouched and alive in a way that your everyday life simply isn't. That dream came from somewhere real. Bali genuinely had all of that. And if you'd arrived 20 years ago, you would have found it. But here's what the travel content never shows you, what's just outside the frame. The traffic that turns a 15-minute drive into 2 hours of sitting still in 35-degree heat. The rice terrace viewpoints that now have a queue and a ticket booth and an Instagram swing operation every 100 meters. The spiritual ceremonies that have quietly become photo shoots, with tourists moving through them like a museum exhibit. The Balinese people, who are among the warmest and most culturally extraordinary communities anywhere on Earth, watching their sacred spaces become someone else's content. If you've been to Bali and felt like you were watching a performance of a place rather than actually being inside it, you weren't imagining things. The Bali that made everyone fall in love with it still exists, in fragments, in the north, in the villages, in the early mornings before the tours begin. But the version that was sold to you, that version left before you arrived.
Paris is the one that people are most afraid to admit out loud, because saying Paris was disappointing feels like saying you don't appreciate beauty or romance or culture, like something is wrong with you. So people come home and post the photos and say it was incredible, and quietly never admit that they spent 3 days exhausted and slightly on edge, holding their bag tight on the metro and eating at restaurants they picked because they were too tired to walk any further. Here's the thing about Paris. The magic is absolutely real. The city is genuinely one of the most beautiful places human beings have ever built. But the magic lives in the margins. It lives in a side street cafe on a rainy Wednesday morning. It lives in a small gallery that isn't on any list. It lives in a conversation with someone who actually lives there. The version of Paris that gets sold, the Eiffel Tower at golden hour with nobody around you, the Louvre experience that feels like a private viewing, the Mona Lisa that somehow looks the way it does in the posters, that version requires either extraordinary luck, extraordinary money, or a photographer who woke up before the city did. What most people get is the Eiffel Tower surrounded by hundreds of other people and someone trying to sell them a keychain every 30 seconds. What most people get at the Louvre is 45 seconds in front of a painting that is significantly smaller than they expected, behind thick glass with 100 phones held in front of them, before the crowd behind them gently pushes them along. None of that means don't go. It means go knowing what you're actually going to find, and knowing that the real Paris, the one worth falling in love with, is not on any tourist map. Dubai is the destination that feels the most loaded, because for a lot of people, Dubai represents something beyond a holiday. It represents arrival, standing at the top of the world's tallest building and feeling like you've made something of your life. That feeling is completely valid. There is something genuinely extraordinary about what Dubai built from desert in 3 decades. The skyline is real. The Burj Khalifa is awe-inspiring in person in a way that photographs don't fully capture. But here is the honest truth that takes most people by surprise when they actually land. Dubai was not built for you to have a meaningful experience. It was built for you to spend money in a very impressive setting. The beach is artificial. The desert experience, the thing that should feel wild and ancient and humbling, is a coordinated tour with 400 other tourists in matching safety vests.
The city itself, for all its visual drama, has almost no street life, almost no spontaneity, almost none of the accidental magic that makes a place feel real. You can spend an enormous amount of money in Dubai and come home with beautiful photographs and a very strange feeling that you were a guest in a theme park that happened to be a country. If you want spectacle,
Dubai delivers it completely. If you want something that stays with you, that changes how you see the world, you are going to need to look somewhere else. Santorini is the one that breaks hearts the most quietly, because Santorini is genuinely, photographically, objectively one of the most beautiful places on Earth. The whitewashed buildings against the deep blue of the Aegean, the caldera dropping away below you, the sunsets in Oya that look painted. None of that is a lie. The lie is the intimacy. The lie is the stillness. The lie is the idea that you will stand at that cliffside viewpoint in the golden hour light and feel something private and profound. What actually happens in Oya at sunset is that several hundred people gather on a very small stretch of cliff, shoulder to shoulder, phones and selfie sticks raised, and watch the sun go down together in the least romantic atmosphere you can imagine. The accommodation that looks like it floats serenely above the water costs more per night than most people's monthly salary. The narrow streets that look so peaceful in photographs are, in the peak months, a slow-moving human traffic jam of day trippers from cruise ships docked in the bay below. Santorini is still worth seeing. The views will still take your breath away. But the experience you imagined, the one where it's just you and someone you love, and the silence and the light, that experience requires either going in April or November, spending more money than you probably planned, or accepting that the photograph and the feeling are two completely different things. Venice is the destination that makes people feel guilty for being disappointed. Because how do you complain about a city built entirely on water? How do you stand on a bridge over a canal and not feel something extraordinary? And you will feel it. You absolutely will in the first hour. The problem is what comes after the first hour. Venice in peak season is one of the most overwhelming sensory experiences in Europe, and not in a good way. The streets are narrow and completely full of people moving in one direction. The restaurants that line the main tourist routes have laminated picture menus and prices that have almost no relationship to the quality of the food. The famous gondola ride, the thing you've been imagining since you were a child, costs around 80 euros for 30 minutes and takes you through canals that in the heat of summer smell exactly as you'd expect water that hasn't moved properly in several centuries to smell. And underneath all of it is a deeper sadness. The knowledge that the actual Venetians, the people whose families built this city over 1,000 years, have largely left. The population of Venice has fallen from 170,000 after the Second World War to under 50,000 today. What remains is one of the most extraordinary architectural achievements in human history, slowly being converted into a museum that charges tourists an entry fee to visit. Go to Venice, but go in winter, go in the rain, go when the cruise ships aren't there, and you will find something genuinely magical that most people never experience because they went in August.
Phuket is the one that stings the most if you went there chasing something authentic. Because Thailand, the country itself, the culture, the food, the temples, the people, is one of the most genuinely life-changing travel experiences available to anyone, anywhere in the world. People go to Thailand and come back different. People go to Thailand and go back. Phuket is not that Thailand. Phuket is what happens when an extraordinarily beautiful place gets discovered, then developed, then packaged, then sold at industrial scale until the thing that made it beautiful is almost completely buried under the infrastructure built to profit from it. Patong Beach at night is a wall-to-wall corridor of bars and clubs and neon signs that could genuinely be anywhere on Earth. The Phi Phi Islands day trip, which every hotel in Phuket sells as a non-negotiable highlight, involves being loaded onto a boat with 100 other tourists, arriving at beaches so crowded that the coral reefs have been measurably damaged by the volume of sunscreen and human contact, taking your photos and going back. The Thailand you were looking for when you booked Phuket is still out there. It's in Chiang Mai, it's in Pai, it's on islands further south that haven't been fully discovered yet. It's just not in Phuket anymore. Barcelona might be the most complex entry on this list, because Barcelona is not overrated in the way that some of the others are. The city is extraordinary. The architecture of Gaudí alone, the Sagrada Familia, Park Güell, Casa Batlló, is worth crossing the world for. The food scene is world-class in a way that is completely genuine and not manufactured for tourists.
The neighborhoods have real culture and real life and real passion. The problem with Barcelona is that the city is in open conflict with its own popularity. And as a tourist, you arrive into the middle of that conflict without being told it's happening. In 2024, locals marched through the streets in organized protests against mass tourism. Residents in neighborhoods like the Gothic Quarter and El Born have been priced out of their own homes by short-term rentals catering to visitors. The mayor of Barcelona has publicly stated that the current level of tourism is unsustainable. When you walk down the Rambla with your hand on your wallet, feeling vaguely unwelcome without knowing quite why, that feeling is accurate. You are walking through a city that is exhausted by people like you, not because of anything you've done personally, but because of what 100 million tourists before you have collectively done to a place that was never designed to absorb all of that. Barcelona is still worth going to, but go knowing that the most extraordinary version of the city exists in the parts that aren't on the tourist map, and that finding it requires curiosity, a bit of Spanish, and the willingness to walk away from the obvious.
Here is what all 7 of these places have in common. They were all at some point genuinely extraordinary. They were all discovered by people who went looking for something real, something beautiful, something that made them feel alive in a way that ordinary life doesn't always allow. And then they were photographed, and hashtagged, and featured, and recommended, and packaged, until the thing that made them extraordinary got buried under the weight of everyone arriving to experience it at the same time. The disappointment you felt, or the fear that you might feel it, is not a sign that travel doesn't work. It's a sign that you went looking for something real. And real things are still out there. They're just not always at the top of the algorithm. The world is full of places that will genuinely change you, that will give you that feeling you were looking for. And most of them have fewer than 1 million hashtags. If this video helped you understand a trip you already took, or helped you think differently about where you're going next, subscribe to iCraveTravel, because finding those real places and being honest about the ones that aren't, that's exactly what we're here for. We'll see you in the next one.